Steak did not just feed America, it built an identity. The cattle drives of the 1860s turned beef into a national obsession, and that obsession never left. But here is what it is making you overpay for. A USDA choice ribeye costs $12 a pound. A 4-ounce portion of A5 wagyu, the size of your palm, costs $180. Both are called steak. That $180 plate is not 15 times better than the $12 pound. Not even close. And the beef industry is counting on you, never figuring out where the value stops and the story begins. These are the 7 levels of steak. By the end of this, you will know exactly where to spend your money and exactly where you are just paying for a fancy plate. Level 1, the misunderstood cut. Under $10 per pound. This is where most of America eats steak, and the beef industry has spent decades making people feel bad about it. Chuck, bottom round, eye of round, sirloin tip. These are the hard-working muscles, the cuts that moved, pulled, and carried the animal every day of its life. More connective tissue, less marbling, more chew. The story being sold is that these are the consolation prize, the thing you buy when you cannot afford the good stuff. That story is wrong, and it is costing people good meals. The connective tissue that makes these cuts tough at high heat becomes gelatin at low heat. Rich, silky, deeply flavorful in a way that a fast-cooked ribeye can never replicate. Give a chuck steak 4 hours of low heat and liquid, and it will fall apart with a fork and taste like it took all day. Because it did. The standout at this level is the flat iron. Shoulder cut, $8 to $10 a pound. One of the most flavorful cuts on the entire animal. Butchers have known this for 30 years. Most grocery store shoppers walk right past it every single week because nobody told them to stop. But understand the ceiling. No amount of skill fully closes the gap between a $9 chuck and what is coming above it. The industry undersells these cuts. But that does not mean the cuts above them are not worth knowing. The rule at level 1, the cheap cuts are not the problem. The story being told about them is. Learn to cook them correctly, and you eat better than most people spending twice as much. But the ceiling is real. Level 2, the Weeknight Workhorse. $10 to $18 per pound. This is where the game changes. At this price point, you cross into cuts that cook fast, finish in a pan, and put something genuinely satisfying on the table in 20 minutes. No Dutch oven, no 4 hours, just a cast iron and some attention. The New York strip, the flank steak, the top sirloin. Flank steak is the most underrated cut at this level. Lean, intensely beefy, and almost always ignored in favor of cuts with more marketing behind them. The beef industry does not push flank steak because there is no premium story to sell around it. There is just a good cut at a fair price, which is exactly why you should be buying it. The New York strip is the workhorse. Firmer than a ribeye, stronger beef flavor, holds up to a grill or a cast iron without falling apart. $14 to $16 a pound, and almost always on the shelf. Because demand never outpaces supply the way it does for the cuts above it. Here's what most people get wrong at this level. They spend all their energy choosing the right cut, and almost none of it on what happens after the pan comes off the heat. Rest time matters more than most people realize. A 1-inch strip rested 8 minutes after cooking beats a $35 cut sliced immediately. The juice stays in the meat instead of running onto the cutting board. It is the difference between a good steak and a great one, and it costs absolutely nothing. Most people skip the rest. Most people wonder why their steak is tough. The industry is happy to let them keep buying more expensive cuts looking for the answer. The rule at level 2, the cut gives you the ceiling. What you do after the heat goes off sets the floor. Master the rest, and you are already cooking better steak than most people who spent twice as much on the cut. Level 3, the sweet spot. $18 to $30 per pound. Ask serious home cooks where the best value in the entire steak world lives. Most of them point right here without hesitating. The ribeye, rib section, one of the least worked muscles on the animal. Less movement means more intramuscular fat. More fat means more marbling. And more marbling means when heat hits this steak, the fat renders and bastes the meat from the inside out. You cannot fake that. You cannot technique your way into it from a cheaper cut. A bone-in ribeye at $22 to $28 a pound, cast iron pan, butter, garlic, thyme, finished in a 400-degree oven. That is the meal that makes people stop talking mid-bite. This is the cut that converts people. Someone who thinks they do not like steak has almost always never had a properly cooked ribeye. It is not just the best value on the ladder. It is the entry point to caring about beef at all. Now, the tomahawk ribeye also lives at this level, and this is where I will say something that will upset some people. The tomahawk is theater. That 16-inch bone adds almost nothing to the flavor of a properly cooked ribeye. The meat is identical to a boneless ribeye from the same section. You are paying a $30 to $50 premium for presentation. For the photo. For the moment it lands on the table and everyone turns to look. If that matters to you, and honestly, sometimes it should, worth every penny. But if you just want the best steak for the money, buy the boneless ribeye and pocket the difference. The rule at level 3. The ribeye is where steak stops being a meal and starts being an experience. Once you understand what this cut can do, every level above it makes sense, and every level below it makes you wish you had spent the extra $10. Level 4. The craft tier. $30 to $60 per pound. You are not just paying for beef at this level, you are paying for time. That is the thing most people never fully grasp about dry-aged beef until they actually eat it. The price is not about a fancier cut or a better farm. It is about what happens when you take a great piece of beef and give it weeks to become something it could not be any other way. When beef is dry-aged, it sits in a temperature and humidity-controlled environment for 21 to 45 days. Two things happen. Moisture evaporates, concentrating the flavor into a smaller, denser package, and natural enzymes break down the muscle fibers, creating a tenderness that no fresh-cut steak can replicate regardless of grade. The result is a steak with a deeper, nuttier, almost funky complexity. People describe notes of blue cheese, of earth, of something they cannot quite name but cannot stop thinking about after the meal is over. A dry-aged ribeye from a real butcher runs $40 to $60 a pound. A 45-day dry-aged cut loses up to 30% of its original weight to evaporation. That weight loss is part of what you are paying for. But here is what most dry-aged content will never tell you. The quality of the beef going into the aging process determines everything coming out of it. A mediocre choice ribeye, dry-aged for 45 days, becomes a more complex mediocre ribeye. Dry aging amplifies what is already there. It does not create something from nothing. Start with prime, then age it. That is the order of operations. And if you have never eaten a properly dry-aged steak, find a real butcher, not a grocery store claiming to dry age in a plastic bag on a shelf, and spend the money once. It will permanently change how you think about beef. The rule at level 4. Time is the ingredient. Cook these simply. Salt, pepper, butter. The beef is already doing the work. Get out of its way. If this breakdown is useful, hit subscribe. I cover food like this every week. The real story behind what you are eating and whether it is actually worth what you're paying. Now let's keep climbing. Because from here, you're going to find out why the word wagyu on a menu means almost nothing, and why every Kobe steak you ate before 2012 was a lie. Level 5, the label trap. $60 to $120 per pound. Here is where the beef industry starts lying to you. Not with false information, with true information presented in a way designed to confuse you into spending more than you should. The word wagyu is the clearest example. Wagyu cattle originated in Japan, bred specifically for their extraordinary fat-to-muscle ratio. The fat in wagyu beef has a higher ratio of monounsaturated fat than standard beef. It melts at a lower temperature and begins rendering the moment it hits your tongue. That is real. That is genuinely different from anything below this level. But here's what the menu will not tell you. A steak labeled wagyu at a mid-range American restaurant could contain as little as 6% wagyu genetics. 6%. Technically accurate under current US labeling laws. Practically meaningless on the plate. You are paying a wagyu premium for an Angus steak with a wagyu great-great-grandmother. Full-blood American wagyu, 100% wagyu genetics, no crossbreeding, is a completely different product. The marbling is dramatically more intense. The flavor is richer. The texture is softer, and it is rarely what you are getting unless you know exactly what to ask for. There are ranches in Texas, Colorado, and the Pacific Northwest producing full-blood American wagyu that rivals anything coming out of Japan at a fraction of the import cost. Snake River Farms in Idaho is the most well-known domestic source. Their black grade entry level consistently outperforms USDA Prime from major grocery chains in blind tastings. Their gold grade sits at the very top of what American beef can be. Most people have never heard of Snake River Farms. Most people are buying a word on a menu instead. The same problem exists with USDA grading. Prime sounds definitive. It is not. Two steaks can both carry the USDA Prime label and taste completely different depending on breed, feed, age at processing, and how the animal was raised. The grade is a floor, not a ceiling. The rule at level 5, the label is not the product. Know the breed, know the source, know the percentage. Otherwise, you are paying premium prices for a marketing story, and the industry is counting on you not knowing the difference. Level 6, the Japanese standard, $120 to $300 per pound. Now, we are in territory where normal buying strategies stop working entirely. Full-blood Japanese A5 Wagyu. Before we talk about what A5 means on paper, understand what it looks like in person. A raw slice of genuine A5 does not look like a steak. It looks like a piece of white marble with thin red lines running through it. The fat is not streaked through the muscle. The muscle is threaded through the fat. When you hold a slice up to the light, it is almost translucent. That is what you are paying for at this level, and nothing below it looks anything like it. Now here is what that means on a grading certificate. A 5 is a precise government certification administered by the Japan Meat Grading Association. The beef must score an 8 or higher on a 12-point marbling scale developed specifically for Wagyu. Most genuine A5 scores between 10 and 12. Every criterion, marbling, color, texture, fat quality, must hit the maximum level simultaneously. Most beef in the world does not come close. That fat changes everything about how the beef cooks. A 5 Wagyu begins rendering at room temperature. It does not need high heat. It needs restraint. Most people who cook a 5 for the first time use too much heat because that is what they learned on standard beef. The result is a steak that has rendered out most of what made it extraordinary before it ever hits the plate. 60 to 90 seconds per side in a screaming hot dry pan. Salt after cooking, not before. Nothing else. The steak finishes itself. A 5 from Miyazaki or Kagoshima runs $150 to $300 per pound from a reputable importer. Standard restaurant portion is 3 to 4 ounces. Not because restaurants are being cheap, because more than that becomes genuinely difficult to finish. The richness accumulates in a way that has no equivalent in standard beef. Now, Kobe beef. Everyone has heard of it. Almost nobody outside of Japan has actually eaten it. And for a long time, this is the part that should make you genuinely angry. Almost nobody in America was eating it, even when they thought they were. Kobe is not a style. It is not a grade. It is a certification so specific it makes USDA Prime look like a participation trophy. The cattle must be purebred Tajima strain Wagyu, born in Hyogo Prefecture, raised in Hyogo Prefecture, fed a specific diet, processed at designated slaughterhouses in Hyogo Prefecture. The resulting beef must score A4 or A5 with a marbling score of 6 or higher. In 2024, fewer than 6,000 cattle in the entire world met every one of those requirements. Here is the truth. The United States did not receive its first certified Kobe beef shipment until 2012. Not one certified pound before that date. But American restaurants had been putting the word Kobe on their menus for years before that. Kobe burgers, Kobe sliders, Kobe steaks. Every single menu was lying. Some restaurants are still doing it today. The word Kobe on an American menu without a certification number attached to it means nothing. It is a story being sold to people who do not know to ask for the paperwork. Authentic Kobe exists in the United States. You will pay $200 to $300 per pound, and you will need to verify the certification. Anything cheaper is not Kobe. It is wagyu at best. It is a word on a menu at worst. The rule at level 6. These are experiences with a paper trail. Verify the certification. Cook with restraint. And do not put sauce on them. That would be like pouring Coke into a $400 bottle of Burgundy. Level 7. The Holy Grail. Chase $300 plus per pound and beyond. We have officially left the world of eating and entered the world of obsession. At level 7, the beef is famous before it is ever butchered. Matsusaka beef from Mie Prefecture in Japan is the most extreme example of what cattle farming becomes when price is no longer a constraint and perfection is the only objective. Matsusaka cattle are exclusively female. Never bred. Pregnancy changes the muscle composition in ways that compromise the final product. Raised on a diet that often includes beer and sake mash. In some farms, classical music plays in the barn, not as a gimmick. Elevated cortisol during the animal's life affects the flavor of the meat after processing. These farmers are managing stress levels in their cattle the way a surgeon manages conditions in an operating room. The farmers know their animals by name. They track lineage across generations. They manage diet, environment, and stress with the same obsessive attention a winemaker gives to a single vineyard block. A single Matsusaka cow sold at auction in 2002 for the equivalent of $396,000. One cow. In the United States, the equivalent lives in heritage breed cattle and extreme dry aging programs. Belted Galloways, Red Devon, Highland cattle. Breeds nearly extinct 30 years ago, now raised by small farms specifically for their flavor profile. These animals are harvested at 3, 4, sometimes 5 years old, compared to the 18 to 24 month standard in commercial beef production. Then dry-aged for 60, 90, sometimes 120 days. A 120-day dry-aged heritage breed ribeye from a boutique producer runs $400 to $600 a pound. Some farms have waiting lists. Some sell out before the animal is processed. The people buying at this level are not buying dinner. They are buying a philosophy. Here is the honest verdict. In controlled blind tastings, real ones, no labels, no price information, no context, most people cannot reliably distinguish a perfect level 7 steak from a perfect A5 at level 6. The differences exist. They are real. But they live in a range of subtlety that requires a trained palate and zero expectation bias to actually perceive. The price at this level is not a measure of flavor. It is a measure of rarity, craft, and the human need to pursue the absolute ceiling of something, regardless of whether that ceiling can actually be tasted. The rule at level 7. This is not about flavor anymore. It is about obsession. Know which one you are paying for before you spend. So where does that leave the person who just wants a great steak? The sweet spot lives between levels 2 and 4. From the New York Strip through dry-aged beef. Roughly $14 to $60 a pound. This is where quality and value actually align. Here's the progression that makes sense for most people. Start at level 2. Buy a flank steak or a New York strip. Cook it correctly. Learn what rest time actually does to a piece of beef. Once you understand that, move to level 3. Buy a bone-in ribeye from a real butcher, not a grocery store. Cook it in cast iron. Understand what marbling actually tastes like when it renders properly. Once you have that reference point, splurge once on level 4. Find a butcher who dry ages in-house. Spend the $60. Eat it simply. Let it show you what time does to beef. After that, you will have a personal reference point for every level above it. You will know what genuine quality tastes like. And you will never again pay a premium for a story without knowing whether the beef behind it is worth it. At level 5, ask questions before you spend. At level 6, ask for the certification paperwork. At level 7, ask yourself honestly whether you are chasing flavor or chasing a story. The beef industry is very good at selling stories. The best thing you can do is know the difference before you open your wallet. The best steak is the one you actually cook. Everything else is just expensive furniture. If you want to go deeper, the best cuts by cooking method, how to find a real butcher near you, and what grocery store grading labels are actually hiding, subscribe so you do not miss it. See you in the next one.